back. This is Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small. My co-host is Paul Ogden. Our guest today is Dave Cook. We're discussing immigration law. We're coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana. If you're watching this on the internet, and you're either in the International Space Station or on some station in Antarctica. This is a part of Indianapolis. It's on the north side. It's Broad Ripple. It's kind of cool here. Inherently, it's cool here today. It's a November day, and it's kind of chilly. Paul, you were wanting to follow up on a question, and Dave Cook is an immigration lawyer here in Indianapolis, and we're coming to you from Big Hat Books, which has an excellent selection of books here in Indianapolis, and also has space here to rent for any occasion you might have. Paul, what was the question here?
Well, Dave, I had a question regarding, I had a client, divorced client, in a separate proceeding I was not involved in. Her husband had domestic violence. Husband was from China, not a U.S. citizen, and he broke her arm. And I recall the fact is he got a 365-day sentence. I think it might have been probation. But the fact is he got 365 days instead of 364 days made him eligible for deportation. Are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah, I mean that is the definition of aggravated felony. For instance, if you read that Immigration and Naturalization Act site I referred to earlier, 101A43, it enumerates aggravated felonies. One of them is what would be considered to be a crime of violence by the federal criminal statutes, and you receive a sentence of 1 year or more. So if you were to reduce that sentence to 364 days and it didn't otherwise qualify as an aggravated felony, you could drop out of the aggravated felony category. You may still have an inadmissibility issue, which could cause you considerable problems, but you wouldn't be rendered automatically deportable.
What do you mean by inadmissibility issue?
In immigration, anytime a person presents themselves at a port of entry, an airport, any other regular port as we think of that, coming into the United States, you are considered legally to be presenting yourself for admission into the United States. At that time, there is to be an inquiry about you and who you are and what your background is. And if you have, for instance, criminal convictions that render you inadmissible, then you are not permitted to enter into the United States because you're a category of persons who are inadmissible.
But if the person got the 365-day sentence in a leap year, would that... I don't mean to split hairs, but we are lawyers.
I'd have to sit down and think about that one for a minute.
Well, when you said admissibility...
No, but the Immigration and Naturalization Act, once again, has its own definition of sentence. And a sentence is what you were, in some instances, what you were sentenced to. In other instances, it's what you could have been sentenced to make the determination. So we're all familiar with federal statute where it goes subsection A, subsection B, 9. You got to read 9 different things to make sure that what you read at the beginning really meant what you thought it meant. Well, that's really emphasized.
We got to keep things complicated. Keep us attorneys employed.
Well, yeah, but like Rick Perry said, get it all on one card, and also Rick Perry, I think, is an excellent an exemplar for society. I think anybody who's running for president should give speeches completely hammered. But that's beside the point. That's just a predilection of mine.
Mark likes to do a lot of sarcasm.
And well, just a little.
Sometimes lost or not.
In terms of overall immigration policy, because a lot of people are opposed to people coming into the United States, there are people who don't believe we should have anybody coming into the United States. I mean, there's some pretty extreme positions that people should not be coming into the United States who are not born here. There is another extreme. I personally take the positions, this is a country of immigrants. I mean, if anybody's going to hold any kind of like timeline on it, the people who were indigenous to these shores, they immigrated here in like 30,000 years ago across the Bering Straits. If we want to go to European descended people, then I'm willing to draw a line of about 1660. My people were over here before anybody else. And so, I think that's kind of arbitrary because everybody originally was from someplace else. And I don't see the harm in allowing people to come into the United States. I'm just tossing out a policy.
Well, I don't think that we have any policy that operates that way. I mean, the immigration laws are designed in order to create order and structure as to how people come in, how they can obtain their status, and provide for them a legal vehicle to become legal citizens if that's their desire. It's also designed to protect our public safety and be sure that the individuals, that our borders are not so porous that it becomes public safety issues. And so, from my experience in where we are with immigration today, you know, immigration laws have been in effect for years and years and years. And they're the same immigration laws pretty much now that have been in effect for the last 40 or 50 years. We, after 9/11, changed the way we enforce those laws. And we become much more aggressive. Because there was probably a pretty lackadaisical approach to the enforcement of immigration prior to September 2011.
But did that have any bearing, though? I mean, were those individuals in the United States, the people who were on those flights on 9/11, were they in the United States illegally?
Well, you know, I can't answer to that. I think some of them were here on visas, some weren't. I can't. But my point is this. Because of the manner in which we've enforced it up to this point in time, we now have sort of an out-of-control problem. And we don't have the actual human and fiscal resources to deal with the actual illegal immigrants that are in the United States today. I saw a statistic the other day, and I think it's accurate, that we only have the resources, human and fiscal, to deport only 10 or 15% of the illegal immigrants that are in the United States today. When I go to immigration court in Chicago, the first hearing that a person has is called a master calendar hearing. That is oftentimes set out a year from the date they're placed in removal proceedings. I was in Chicago last week and received individual merit hearings, which means I went with somebody who had received their notice to appear in 2010. We had their master calendar hearing, their first hearing, in November of 2011. I was able to show the immigration judge I had a prima facie case for cancellation of removal and received a hearing date in 2014. So,
okay, now has the person been released the whole time, or are they still in federal custody?
This person was out of custody. Almost all of my clients are out of custody people. So, and they're able to come back if you can show in certain cases and able to apply for employment authorization and get a Social Security number and then be able to get a driver's license and do all of the things that we want them to do.
What about, Dave, and this I know this is not your area, building fence. Building fence could be actual physical fence, it could be electronic, nipping it in the bud before they get into this country.
With concrete walls, wire, a sign on the sign that says "Do not enter" in French, because this would be for the Canadians, and then have a moat, and then alligators in the moat, and it's electrified.
Well, I don't know about all of those things, but I do know that that area is a major problem because our borders are porous, even with the measures that have most recently been taken. When I sit down and talk to my clients, and of course one of the things we're very interested in is when you come to the United States, how did you come in the United States? What has been your departure record, and so on and so forth. And routinely I find that people go to the border, they're rejected, and they turn right around and go back and get rejected, and they turn right around and come back in. And so
they actually go through a checkpoint, is what you're saying?
Well, they just get stopped or caught. Then they're fingerprinted, photographed, and rejected. But apparently, our ability to keep people from crossing our borders illegally is so ineffective at this moment is that my point is they just turn around and come right back, and oftentimes make it.
Well, we're a large country. We have huge expanses of borders. people are innovative about getting, especially from situations of squalor, to try to get someplace where we have jobs that, and that goes into a policy matter. There are like 4 arguments that are advanced, I read in one scholarly journal, for keeping immigrants out of the country or restricting immigration. And one is that immigrants would take jobs that lower skilled Americans would otherwise have. And I know people talk about going to a fast food place and a foreign person, usually someone of Latino descent, is working there. And people will say, well, that, you know, an American could have been working in that job. I remember when I was just out of law school and I put my shingle out and I was handling traffic tickets and child support cases and civil court, and you'd go into child support court and it was like a cattle call. I mean, they'd call cases up, and so somebody is behind in support. Generally it was the former husband or the father, and they'd say, are you, you know, they first of all ask, are you employed? Say no. How far did you go in school? And 80% of the time, the guy would say, dropped out of high school. And then the judge would say, well, have you applied any place for a job? And this is in the early 90s. And the guy would say, well, nobody's hiring. And the judge would say, well, have you tried it at McDonald's? And I'm not blasting a negative at McDonald's, even though it's food that nobody should eat. Anyways, and here a high school dropout, American-born person, would look at the judge like the judge had just insulted him and say, I wouldn't work at McDonald's. And I think that a lot of American kids take the attitude that there are jobs beneath them, and yet there are people from other countries who are more than happy to fill these jobs that we need filled.
Mm-hmm.
So we got lazy teenagers.
Yeah, we got lazy adults.
Yeah, lazy teenagers, we got lazy adults in this country. And that's one of the argument is that Americans aren't taking some of these fast food jobs, that they're not picking, not cutting tobacco. I'm from the southern part of the state where we actually cut tobacco. That there are people not willing to go out and do hard labor anymore.
They're lower skilled, lower paid jobs.
Correct, but that was before, most of those arguments were made before the current recession. I'm not sure that's still the case.
Actually, there was just a study done about wages of native-born workers in Arizona after E-Verify came in, because E-Verify is where in Arizona adopted that. That means an employer has to verify online that an employee is here legally, or else the employer gets whacked under state law. And they found that there was no effect on wages or employment for native-born people. And so, and that was just in Arizona. That's just a recent study. I don't know if it's peer reviewed or anything like that. I know that argument is made, but they didn't find that. And then there was a study that was done, another scholarly, read these scholarly things. Another one that I can't find, here it is.
Wikipedia?
No, this is Lethbridge Undergraduate Research Journal, 2008. But we're at the end of this segment. We'll be back in just a second.
Specifically erectile dysfunction.